Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to another episode of Herstories. Today, I'm super excited to have Vanessa Renee join me on Herstories. Welcome, Vanessa.
Hi, Elaine.
Thanks for joining me. So, every time I start off Herstories, I talk about why someone's inspiring, and I'm going to say this. I'm very honest. The minute I met you and saw who you were, I felt like you were a kindred spirit. I felt you've gone through some of the things I've gone through in my life, and I find you super inspiring for taking, you know, lost love, lost life, and transforming it. You've created transformative wisdom and you're helping others really survive but thrive. I find you super inspiring. You're about to kick off a podcast, and there's a lot of things that you are just starting, including getting married in the spring. So you really inspire me, Vanessa. I'm happy that you're in my world, and I'm excited for people to get to know you.
Yes, thank you so much, Elaine. I also felt like you were a kindred spirit as well, so happy to hear that.
Thank you. So why don't we kick off? So tell me about Vanessa. Who is Vanessa?
Who is Vanessa? Vanessa is a creative. She is a dreamer. She is a romanticizer, and she is very idealistic, which can sometimes get me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, no, that's a great overview. And as we met talking about heartache, and let's just kick it off with let's go down the sad part to get to the happy part. So talk to me about where were you the last few five, years ago, and let's talk about kind of where your life was at a turning point. Let's start there.
Yeah, so my journey began 7 years ago. It was around the holidays in 2016. I thought I had everything that I wanted in my life. I was living in a city that I just adored. I was living in the Bay Area. And if anyone has been to San Francisco during its heyday, not so much now, but if you've been to San Francisco, it was just a magical place. So I was living there. I was in my career. I have a background in education. I was doing well in my career. I was married and I was planning on buying a house. Like everything was just, in my world, it was just perfect. And then one day, it was interesting. I actually had a dream about it before it happened, but
Really? What did you dream?
yeah.
Like premonition that you knew something was wrong?
Yeah, I had a dream that my then husband that I was married to for 4.5 years, when we had got married, he wrote me like this beautiful note, like it was on 2 pages. And the dream was that he held the note in front of my face and he ripped it in half. Yeah, so at that time I didn't know what that meant exactly. I was like, okay, like it's just a dream. About 2 to 3 days later, he then drops the bomb on me that, he just doesn't want to be married to me anymore. And just everything just kind of snowballed from there. It's like this perfect life that I had built, in my head, it had just crumbled. Like it just crumbled, like building a house made of sand.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I felt like we talked about this together, and I felt like, oh my God, I so understood what you felt because that was my reality of like, from one moment, I'm like, oh, I thought I was so happy. And I think I told you, I told a girlfriend, said, this is the happiest I've ever been. And within 3 or 4 weeks, my entire world's completely imploded. And it is that picture. I do think a sandcastle with all the sand just slowly like going to nothing. I completely get that because that's the way I felt. And did you have people ask me all the time, did you have any signs? Like, did you know that he was going to do this? And like, when in reflection, because sometimes it's you have to reflect and go, maybe he wasn't so happy, or maybe there were signs. Did you see anything?
I think for me at the time, I didn't see anything, but like for me in hindsight, now I'm like, oh yeah, there were definitely signs that I completely overlooked. He started to withdraw. He started to be very secretive. And I just chopped it off to, oh, like maybe he's stressed at work or. So
And
yeah,
living in the moment, I think it's hard because you're like, oh, it's just life. Life gets
right.
busy and life work is crazy. And you're like, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, they really are retreating almost.
Yeah. So in hindsight, yes, there were signs and there were red flags, but I didn't think that it was anything like big.
Yeah. So when you get to that point, I feel like I always say like you fall to the ground. How long did it take you to go, oh my God, as you and I've talked about, like the stages of grief, how do you go through, first of all, denial? You're like, this didn't just happen. And then you have to learn to accept, and there's anger, and there's, all these other parts. Do you remember that moment? Like, how long did it take you to get honestly off the floor to go, oh my God, this is my new reality?
You know what? It took a little while,
Mhm.
because I had like all these moving parts. Like it was just very nuanced because first there is the person that hey, I don't want to be with you anymore. Well, we share an apartment, there are things that we share. And during that time, like I said, I was in education. I love education, but education does not pay very well in the traditional sense. So even though I
As,
was doing
as it should. It's
right as it should, it's
yeah.
like, pay your teachers and your educators. But yeah, I wasn't making a lot of money, even though I was very celebrated at my job. And so there was then all the survival stress kind of came up that I had to solve. I had
And you're
to,
also not like Vanessa, you're living in the Bay Area. So let's
yeah,
just say no matter what job you have, but obviously education is one of them. It's not like you're in the middle of nowhere where you're like, oh, I can swing an apartment. It becomes reality of, oh my God, I can't afford this alone.
yes.
So that's part of the bigger picture of like, now what do I do on a single salary? So then do you go through your process like, oh my God, we have to get an apartment. Did he move out? How'd you do it?
Yeah. So I've always been a very diplomatic person. So I was just like, you know what? I don't feel comfortable like in this house or apartment anymore. You just announced that you didn't want us to be together. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to bow out gracefully and I'm going to leave. So I left and I was couch surfing with some friends for a while. And I had to regrettably tell my job that, I had to look for something else, that I couldn't be there. And so I applied for other positions. I got offered a position that would actually pay me well enough, but they actually, at the last minute, after doing all of the medical and the background check and accepting the offer, they rescinded my offer. So it was like this whole other grieving process of being in this place that I had loved, and I had lived there for over a decade. And all of a sudden, like things and options are being withdrawn from me. And that is when I knew, you know what? I can't stay here. I can't. My body just went through deep burnout. Like I couldn't get in my car. I couldn't drive. Like I would just open my eyes and it just seemed like the world would just move. So
Felt it was slow motion. I
yeah,
felt like I was like walking, but everyone's walking really fast and I'm walking really slow trying to survive. It's a very surreal moment. I
yeah.
completely understand that.
So yeah, so I was like, you know what? That's when I was like, I have to throw in the towel. My body needs to rest.
Mhm.
I called my dad and was like, you know what? I have to move back home. That was everything started in January. I moved 400 miles back to LA about in May. So it's kind of like that long process. And my dad was so nice. He drove out, flew out, helped me pack up all my stuff, drove my 25-year-old cat and my other cat and all my stuff all the way back to LA. And that is where I stayed, and I slept on my mom's couch for 3 years. So during that time, that the grieving process began for me.
And did your family, because I think the hard part is also you were like, in fairness, you were lucky you didn't have kids, but you have friends that are in common, you have family. How hard was it? Because a lot of times in divorce, it's like it separates and you lose people that you thought were friends. You see who your true friends are. How was that? You were lucky you had great parents. So that's thankful you did. how do you feel about like, friends and support? Obviously you're couch surfing, so you had a
Yes.
great group of friends, but did you lose people in this process? And did you see who your true friends were throughout kind of all this?
I definitely saw who my true friends were. That was also another part of the grieving process that I didn't expect.
Mhm.
Um, I realized that the friend group that I had was very much about status and appearances. And then, so being a divorced woman doesn't quite fit into their narrative. So I started to get invitations less and less, phone calls less and less. And that was a big shocker for me.
Well, and I think we talked about it even like, what's the new word for divorce? Because you and I talked about like, I feel like it's a positive thing. Like to me, you and I could have been with our exes, no offense to them, but we have these great new chapters of life. To me, divorce is so negative and it's a stereotype, and couples don't want to invite you, and it becomes this, it doesn't have to be bad. It can be good, and we're not this, group of people that are, just because we're single and it's only one doesn't mean we shouldn't be invited. And I find, I'm sure you felt the same way, that it's like people really do almost ostracize you for the scarlet letter of, oh goodness, she's divorced. And I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
Yes, I did. I didn't realize how much being a divorced woman was so stigmatized. And I didn't have any frame of reference for it
Mm-hmm.
because um, my parents were never married. So, and I have a lot of single women in my family. We don't really have a lot of marriages that happen in our family. So for me, I didn't necessarily know what that process even looked like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had some friends and I remember looking at them, and I never judge because I think you don't know someone's relationship, or I tried not to. But there is definitely, you knew those people, and I always felt people were talking behind my back. Oops, sorry, well,
It's a,
that's interesting.
it's an alert.
It's it's an alert for that's wild. I heard there was going to be some emergency broadcast. We're going to try to cut that piece out.
Oh yeah, no problem.
It's bizarre on both ends. So, did you feel that people were talking about you?
Oh, we're getting it too.
Yeah, it's some
Awesome.
emergency. They were doing it across the country, I heard, which I didn't realize it would be during our time.
Okay.
So I'll cut this piece out. So, did you feel people were talking behind you to some degree, like your group of friends, that I felt people were whispering behind, like trying to get the scoop of what happened? And were people trying to get your narrative of what it was? And did anyone know he was going to do it? Was the gossip part of your, you know, survival to get to those through those 3 years? Did you feel any of that?
The great thing about it was that I moved.
Oh, so you
So I
had a
wasn't
clean slate.
privy to it.
That's
So I'm sure people talk, but I was already 400 miles away. So I didn't really get to feel any of that.
Do you have any regret moving out of the apartment? Or I love that you did move. Like, is that part of the shedding the skin of, here, that was that chapter and I have to find a way to get through it? Did you feel that must have helped you in some way? Because I'm still in the same house. I'm, living my new life, but it's still the old life in some ways. That must have been almost cathartic for you to leave and be like, I'm moving 400 miles away. It must have felt good.
It was very painful at first. I didn't see the blessing in it until like years later. And I had often thought, well, what if I did keep my apartment? But I became someone different when I moved back home and I actually started my healing process. And I feel as though that I wouldn't be as far along if I would have kept the apartment.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And let's talk about your healing process, because I'm always fascinated with women that are strong like you. That how do you find the strength to overcome the heartbreak? Because it's you have a path that you think it's going, and all of a sudden you're like, the life I thought that I've been building is no longer, it's gone. How did you find the strength to overcome the heartbreak? And I know you said it took you a few years, which I think is so admirable to take the time. But what do you remember the day where you're like, oh my God, I'm done. I'm at a really good place.
Hmm. Well, the process of that was really interesting. I felt like I didn't have a choice. It felt like life had kind of pushed me to this rock and a hard place. And it's like, you know what? Like, you have a decision to make. Either you pick yourself up and you turn this around and you move forward, or you let this destroy you. And it's really interesting, but the narrative in my family on both sides is that, they were very loving, happy-go-lucky people until they met a man that broke their heart, and it just completely shattered just their self-esteem and everything about them. So I have a lot of women in my family who that was their narrative. And I just remember when it finally happened to me, I was like, I just was like, no, like this, I'm not gonna let this happen to me. I'm not gonna let one person define how I live the rest of my life. And so after that, I was just a seeker of answers.
Well, and I think you and we've talked about, but I think what one of the reasons I find you such a kindred spirit is you're not a victim. You found this, and I feel like I said that to you right away when we met. I don't want to be a victim. Just because I had this life and this life in chapters over, no one's going to define me. I'm going to define myself, and I'm choosing to be happy. I'm choosing to move on. And I feel like you're a great example of that as well, that you were never the victim. You could have been at a certain time, but you're like, how can I take this and learn from it? And I feel that that's so inspiring because I think some women just for the rest of their lives they're defined by that, and you and I are, and many others are not going to be defined by that. So is that does that get you up in the morning going, I'm good, I'm in a good place, surviving it?
It does. I'm so happy that I didn't just allow that to turn me into someone that I'm not. And
Mm-hmm.
I also found that because I was around my family and because I was, they watched my struggle of having to just expel all the grief out of my body to get my energy back. Because I was so messed up. I couldn't get off the couch. Like I had no energy. So they watched me get up. I became a yoga instructor, actually retrained for yoga, and
Awesome.
they watched me kind of ascend again. And I remember my grandma telling me that, like, wow, she's like, you really didn't let anything stop you. And I feel as though that it was also very inspiring for them to also show them that, hey, like, there's more life after that. You don't have to be defined by someone that, broke your heart and probably doesn't care about you right now.
And isn't thinking about the damage they did, I feel like
Yes,
that's part of, they do it, they move on, and it's like we're the ones holding the pieces, I think. And
right.
in the end, our best gift is to be like, I don't think about them either. That's it gave me this new life. So tell me, so you're engaged. So I would love to hear. So tell me when were you open to, because I'm once again, you're inspiring me as I'm looking forward to the next chapter to be in love again. When did you realize your heart was ready to find this, fabulous person in your life?
So it's really interesting. I just, just through the process of, just my healing journey and just following my bliss, which was also very healing to me. I just really wanted a companion. And I was like, okay, let me try online dating. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to put a profile out there, we'll see what happens. And so my wonderful fiance, he was actually on there. He messaged me, and come to find out, after a first date, he was like, he lives on the same street as my mom.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Out of all streets in all of LA, like that's pretty wild. Okay, that's cool.
yeah. So it was just, it was, I think that it was just fate.
Yeah. How long after you moved back to LA did you meet him?
Oh, I moved back in 2016 and I met him in 2018. So about 2 years.
Years. That's great. And were you, once you go on a dating app, did you just you're like, now I'm ready? Was it like, oh, I'm ready just to try to meet people and like let yourself get out there again? Did you just know when the time was right?
Yeah, it was just all really just intuitive. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm interested in this. Let me just try it. It was more of a let me see. Like I didn't
Mhm.
really have any expectations.
That's wonderful because I think it's so many people are like, oh, you need to go on dating sites, and I go on and I go off, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm close. I'm not. I feel like I need a little bit more time. But so in this journey, so you end up. How long have you been together with your fiance now?
So we've been together for 5 years.
That's awesome, and you're getting married in the spring.
In the spring, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. And do you have some of your past relationship, does it creep into your current, or are they so polar opposite that you're, because sometimes it's, I don't know if you're afraid of what has happened in the past, like could life repeat itself, because how do you trust someone after being heartbroken?
Right. So definitely, the doubts do come in as far as can you trust this person? But they are so like the person that I'm with now, like my fiance, he is just so polar opposite of everyone that I've ever dated before. There's like a quote that I really love that says that it pretty much says that you'll come to a point where you'll realize why it never worked out with anyone else.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
and that's true. I do believe that, you when you find that right person, you're just going to know that it is the person you're meant to be together with. So, oh, that's so wonderful. So, Vanessa, tell us about, I love the name Transformational Wisdom. And it was something that I was really interested in. It's such a powerful name. Tell me more about that and what this is for you.
Transformative wisdom started uh, through the process of my healing. I going through that process and then also going to yoga school, learning about how emotions get trapped in our bodies and how those things affect us. It affects our health. Um, I just started writing. I just started writing some of the just the nuggets and the pearls that I found was healing for me. And so transformative wisdom started because I had a desire to share some of the things that helped me with other women.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what do you hope to have from Transformative Wisdom? What is your goal over the next few years? What would you like to see it? Because right now we're on Instagram together and you have
Mhm.
some really powerful quotes, and I really enjoy seeing them. Tell us more about that, and where do you want to take this?
Wow. Well, first, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
So transformative wisdom, I see it as my umbrella company for healing, pretty much. And I would love to write a book about just my entire process. So I see me becoming an author. I also see me doing retreats and things to help women learn self-care and just get back in love and in touch with themselves. So I see it doing that. And then I also see it supporting other heart-based umbrella projects such as Better Without Them.
I feel that if you're not healthy, you can't move on mentally. I think physically and your body is so important. And I'm sure you felt the same. Like I really struggled with my stomach is my emotion. So I really
Mhm.
struggled for a long, like I'd say 6 months. I would throw up regularly. I struggled emotionally with my stomach. Was just got myself so worked up, and I feel everyone always says yoga and your body. Your emotions are so tied to that, and I think it's critical to take time to do yoga, do meditation, to things that I'm learning more that, like last night I couldn't sleep and I just sat and was like almost that zen moment of breathing. I have a girlfriend who taught me this past weekend and she said, "Hey, you need to breathe. You're not breathing right. Breathe up here." Like she was really, and I feel like that's all interchangeable. And I think knowing yoga and the healing piece is so helpful for women and people that need, to find ways to be better themselves.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm also a stomach person. So every single time I go through a breakup, and it only happens with breakups, like
Yes.
I can't get anything down.
Same.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
think
hard to
that,
explain to people that I get nauseous fairly easily, but nothing like the heartbreak and loss is my stomach. I can't even explain. I'm so glad you understand what that means because it's you're in knots and I'm just cannot keep food down and I'm sick, like violently sick over my emotions. I wish I didn't have that. But I always know when I'm truly at my lowest, I'm physically sick from my stomach. It's wild.
yeah, I'm in the process of writing the Better Without Them book
Uh-huh.
to help women
Love it.
through heartache. And I actually have a quote in there that talks about how I said that there is a uh, point in my stomach where food and sadness meet.
Yes. That's a really way to do it. Yes, sadness and complete depression. When you can't get yourself up to, and I've talked to you about my lows, that those moments, the sadness, depression, and your stomach are all interchangeable, that you just, and it's takes a little bit every day to get a little bit better. And I love that, something you said earlier, it took you time and you took the time you needed because when you did find this fabulous love, you were ready. And I think so many people are like, oh, just date and do this. And I do think it's a process. Heartbreak is a process. It doesn't go away overnight. Your memory is thinking of them. It takes time for them to be out of your sight. And I love that you did that. And I'm sure, do you feel, would you change anything of that process to get where you are today? Like, would you have wanted to be faster, take a little more time, or do you think you did it the way that it was meant to really be for you?
Well, of course, when you're in agony, you want it to go by fast, but I feel as though that everything happened and it ripened in the time that it needed to ripen. So, like, I could see where every little step kind of led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
So I'm at peace with it.
Yeah, that's no, and I love that. I met a woman who's heartbroken this past weekend, and she made a comment to me and said, oh, I'm ready to date and whatever. And I said, just promise me you do all the steps. Don't skip a step. Some steps will come back and repeat. Like anger
Mhm.
comes and goes with me, depends on the time of the day. That one seems to linger. But I said, don't be too excited and rushed to move on because you're going to set yourself back. And I said, just trust me, you have to. And she was like, she understood what I meant because you have to go through those stages no matter how long it takes you. Some people say it takes 4 years, it takes 3 years, whatever that is for you individually, but don't skip a step. And I'm sure you feel the same that you need to go through it.
Yes. So the issue with that is, so for me, I had two major heartbreaks in my life, and the first one, when it happened, I was like 20, so I didn't really do all the steps and everything that I needed to do correctly. But because I didn't do that,
Yeah.
I kept choosing the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I feel as though that it's important for you to do the steps because if you don't go through the healing process to figure out why you were even attracted to that person in the first place, you'll just keep choosing the wrong person, or you'll bring all of that heartache and baggage into your new relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said you found the person that's opposite. And I think that speaks volumes, but you also don't need to bring the baggage because you took the time. It's almost you have that, you're set up for success. And relationships are hard, but you're off to a great start having that as your foundation. So that's amazing. So when what do you hope people learn from you? Like from these experiences, I feel like we can teach others about heartache. What would you like people to learn from you through this experience you've gone through?
I hope that women learn that, just because you have been rejected, it doesn't mean that you're any less valuable. Doesn't mean that your life won't be fulfilling and happy. The only thing it really means is that you're in a relationship with a person, it didn't work out, and just take whatever lessons or, whatever you learned from that, and you can move forward with your life. I think that there is a lot on the internet right now bashing divorced women, single women, shaming women for not being able to keep a partner. And it's like you have to just silence all of that noise and you just have to get to your inner work and just know that you can always start again. You can have a happy life.
Vanessa, I think that's so beautiful because I do think women sometimes are also hard on women. And
Oh,
if you want
yes.
to have children and if you want to have a career and if you want to have both, and if I think women are always so critical. And I feel like our job as women is to support each other. I think that's part of the reason what you're doing and what I'm doing is women are survivors more than anyone. And we're here to help each other. And I wish women would be more supportive to help each other when we go through heartache or loss or grief or success and happiness. I feel like and I'm sure you might feel the same. I feel like my inner circle is even tighter with those who pick me up off the floor and were with me during my darkest days, but also my happiest days now. And I'm sure you feel the same that women can really help each other, and it shouldn't be this stigma of this is a life that we just happen to fall into.
Yes, and I know that, as far as women's rights and everything, I feel like we've gotten really far, but there are still a lot of antiquated beliefs, and whether us as women want to admit it or not, there is a pecking order with women when it comes to their relationship status. And so if we could just get rid of that and just come together and support each other, I think that better friendships.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And real friendships, not the superficial, as you
Mhm.
said, because you were saying, and I agree, like the superficial with your friends and beauty and style and whatever. And I think as you get older, that stuff doesn't mean quite as much as it did when we were younger. It just doesn't. It's what you have inside is so much more important. But it's hard in the moment when you're like, oh, I do, want these things and the people that represent it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though that, yeah, that's young friendships, but as you get older, you realize that life happens. People have family members that pass away, people get sick, like all kinds of things happen. Like there isn't this you know, superficial ideal life that, they sell you on television. Real life happens, and when real life happens, you have to have friends and you have to give yourself grace for actually being a real person.
With real feelings and emotions. I just think I couldn't agree with you more. So, what are you most excited? Obviously, you're getting married, but what are you
Mhm.
most excited about for your future? When you look at the horizon, what just makes you happy?
So I'm really, really excited about starting my Better Without Them podcast and finishing the book and just working with more women and just spreading the message of healing out there. Like that makes me really excited. I know that one of the things that happened after my divorce was it was really hard for me to get connected to my why anymore. And I feel as though that this gets me connected to my why, gets me out of bed, and it just makes me really excited. So,
That's wonderful. No, and it's true. And I think what I love is, you have a great vision, and I do believe when you believe in yourself more than anything, with no doubt, you really can achieve anything. I love what your mission stands for. I can't wait to see Vanessa where this goes and the retreats and the having women come together. I mean, I love everything that you're doing. And as I said, I love seeing your inspirational quotes more than I can tell you. And there's been a few mornings where I'm like, I just needed that. I just need that affirmation that, hey, here's something to get you through the day. So know that you have a huge fan over here who really does truly. I look forward to it in the mornings. So I always leave with one last question of what empowers you? What inspires you, Vanessa?
I think what inspires me the most is creativity and self expression. Like, I'm just a really big fan of how us as humans just express ourselves. And that gets me up in the morning.
It's so true. We're all so different, but then we're unique, but then we can come together and help each other. And I think that that's, super, that's what makes us all so human. Vanessa, you're super inspiring. I'm so happy you're in my universe. I can't wait to see what you do. And thank you for inspiring women and really helping us understand, life. There is love waiting for all of us at another turn, and it's for the better. So I love seeing what you're doing and can't wait to see what you do next.
Yes.